All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. We're Coursera for Business, and we offer talent transformation solutions from the world's top universities and companies. Today, we're going to cover the frameworks to help you become a data-first organization and talk about how to think about upskilling data science and analytics teams from our very own Emily Glassberg-Sands, Vice President of Data at Coursera. We're also joined by our colleague, Senior Skills Transformation Expert, Kyle Clark, and moderating the webinar today will be Crystal Chen, Product Marketing Lead for Enterprise Solutions. Crystal, I'll take it over from here.
Great, thank you, Deb. Folks, it's great to see so many of you gathered here. So I'm Crystal and I lead the development of enterprise solutions at Coursera. And we've got this great agenda planned and are thrilled to delve into some of our experiences as a business in helping customers work through the challenges of data-related upskilling. So we're going to be sharing with you, one, what we've learned along the way when it comes to delivering a structured approach and frameworks for building high-quality data programs with your cross-functional partners. So whether you're in L&D, looking after the skilling needs of like the entire employee population, or you're a data leader in pursuit of skills on the cutting edge, this webinar is for you. I also want to acknowledge that given these interesting times and knowing that many of you must be working from home and staring at your computer screen all day, we wanted to inject a little more interactivity into this webinar. So we're going to be making liberal use of these Zoom polls to connect a little more with you and learn about you as an audience. And with that, Emily, I'm really excited to introduce you. I look this way as if you were here, but you're on the screen.
I wish I were next to you, Crystal.
I know, me too. So for folks on the line, Emily Glassberg-Sands is our head of data science and data engineering. She holds a PhD from the Department of Economics at Harvard and a BA from Princeton. And her academic research blends experimentation, econometrics, and machine learning to better understand labor markets and consumer decision-making. Emily has also been featured in the popular press, including the NYT, the Wall Street Journal, and NPR. And she's also a member of the World Economic Forum Council on New Metrics. And Emily, you've helped to drive so much impactful innovation at Coursera, and you're just such a recognized leader in the field. I loved your recent talk at the Women in Data Science Conference at Stanford. And I know that I'm not the only one who finds you and your team incredibly inspirational.
Thanks so much, Crystal, for the warm intro. And hi to everybody. Thanks for joining on a Monday morning. Again, I'm Emily. I lead the data team here at Coursera. And it's this team, that's me over there in the yellow circle. And at Coursera, our data team is an end-to-end data team. So our mission is to empower products, business, and education through data. And our approach spans data engineering, data science, and machine learning. At a high level, our data engineering team is focused on building out our data warehouse, in particular our core data lake, and is also responsible for Coursera's in-platform analytics for our enterprise customers, for our university partners, as well as for internal tools to democratize data access for everyone in the company, from marketing to product to services. Our data science group, meanwhile, is focused on modeling and experimentation to inform product and business direction. So this includes things like building internal products to predict latent demand among consumer and enterprise customers alike for content we don't yet have to inform content sourcing. And finally, our third group is machine learning, focused on building the models and algorithms that are directly powering the site. This includes building foundational data products like our skills graph, which powers things from skills-based personalized discovery to skills scoring, measuring the skills each learner has up to what level, to our annual Global Skills Index report, which helps learning leaders design better talent strategies. I'm excited to talk to you today about some of our experiences in working with our enterprise customers to help them become data-first organizations, and to share examples as we go on how to think about data upskilling based on my own experiences as a leader in the field. We do want to make this interactive. As Crystal mentioned, we'll have a number of polls as we roll through. At the bottom of the Zoom, you can also see a section for Q&A. I see Danilo and Marvin have already found it. Feel free to use that to enter questions as we go, and we will have time for Q&A at the end where we'll cover the questions that you've asked there. So first, I'd love to hear a little bit about you, and in particular know who I'm talking to today. So you should see a poll here. Please share briefly what team you're on.
I remember the first time I saw this in a Zoom, and it just really, it's like one of these like customer delight experiences. It's just really cool to be able to offer a functionality like this, especially with like remote working situation and everybody being online.
I mean, I think, so there are about 200 people on the line. I think if we had 200 people in a room, it'd be actually hard to get this level of insight. Fantastic. So looks like about a third learning and development, a third data. It's awesome. Almost an exactly perfect split. And then a bunch of folks in technical roles, engineering, IT, cloud, some folks in product, a good chunk in marketing, and other as well. Well, it's great to see so many L&D and data science leaders in the room, and the rest of you too. I think it just goes to show how many people across so many different functions are really focused on upskilling in data. We're all feeling the pressure of change, especially in today's times. The world is changing at a faster and faster clip, driven primarily by globalization and technology. Things like data and automation are altering how businesses operate and also how we live our lives. The bad news is the kind of change is going to create serious dislocation for many people and for many businesses. And Thomas Friedman talks about this in his most recent book, Thank You for Being Late. In particular, he says, that dark line, the rate of technological change, has surpassed our ability as humans to adapt, the light blue line, and that this is threatening humanity as we know it. He says we need to learn faster, that we need to bend that curve of human adaptability. And what I think the good news is that data and technology can also be part of the solution. So let's talk about some of those opportunities. As a company, when I think about being data first, when I think about harnessing the rich data that is collected as organizations are increasingly capturing data in digital environments and brick and mortar environments, I think about three things. First, I think about making better decisions faster using the data. Second, I think about using the data to drive up revenue growth. And third, using data to improve margins. So double clicking on each of those, and I'll give you a heads up, the next poll will ask you questions about where you're most focused today. So please do start thinking there, and I'm curious to hear your core challenges. On better decisions faster, data can provide a common language, a common optimization function for directing the business. And the resulting alignment can support high quality decisions at the lowest possible levels. This includes both fully automated decisions as well as human in the loop decision making. So a quick example from Coursera, there are a lot of different activities a learner can take on the site. They can just browse, they can register, they can enroll, they can try our paid product, they can express interest in a degree or in our enterprise offering. And we built out an event-based LTV model to estimate the causal effect on Coursera's long-term revenue of each of these actions. And then we built that into our experimentation platform so that when we roll out a new search ranking algorithm or a new homepage or even a whole new product experience, we can measure its impact on long-run metrics, looking holistically across the business lines and make the right call for the business on whether or not to roll it out. The second core opportunity is really around using data to drive revenue growth. And absolutely, you can monetize your data directly, you can sell data, but this is not the most common case we're seeing across industries. What we are more commonly seeing is that you can find customers more efficiently using data science and machine learning, and you can delight them with digital experiences. So we see this over and over again in things like personalized discovery, think of your recommendations, personalized marketing emails, but it's not just in marketing and discovery. At Coursera, for example, we have a suite of personalized learning interventions that identify and intervene with at-risk learners to get them back on track in their courses. And this is yielding double-digit improvements in the rate at which learners are progressing through learning and retaining on the platform. And this is a feature set that wouldn't be possible to build without the rich data that's collected as learners are engaging with the platform and without harnessing that data through data science and machine learning. And then the third opportunity is really around using data to improve margins. And this is about delivering your services with higher quality and lower cost by applying data science across supply chain and servicing and inventory management and more. At Coursera, for example, we use machine learning to accelerate support staff on campus, serving up predictions of who needs support along with very human readable features for what type of help they need, in turn driving down servicing costs and allowing us to keep our price points low with still strong margins and an exceptional high touch learning experience. So with that, I'd love to hear a bit from you as you embrace a data first approach, and maybe even as you think about why you chose to join this webinar today. which of the following is most important for your organization? And we'll give a couple minutes here because there are plenty of options, plenty of opportunity.
And Emily, as I look through this, I'm like, it seems so hard to have to prioritize these. How, like, maybe this is a question for a little later, but I'd be curious to hear your take on how, as a data leader, you help the company prioritize, like, from this list, because to me it seems like everything is super important and, you know, high priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a great question. It comes down to cost benefit analysis. And in my take, I think if you are not doing everything you can to help the organization make better decisions faster, you shouldn't move to the other things, because those decisions affect everyone's productivity. But in terms of the types of data-powered products you build, and whether that's oriented towards driving up revenues or driving down servicing costs, I really think of sort of a cost-benefit analysis, which is what is the potential upside to the business, and how many resources would it take, how risky is the investment, and sort of we sequence from there. We're right now, for example, seeing dramatic increases in the rate at which folks are visiting Coursera amid coronavirus. Lots of folks are cooped up. We're seeing literally order of magnitude increases in site traffic and registrations. And correspondingly, that's leading to tremendous increases in our service load, because lots of people are reaching out for support. And so now is actually a time when we need to invest more in that. Well, this is quite a savvy group. The folks are definitely about 2/3. Their number one priority is making better decisions faster. I think that's definitely a core foundation. And if you're not doing everything you can there yet, I think investing in the rest is maybe a little bit premature. And then it sounds like we have a bunch of folks who are at organizations that are ready to start either monetizing data or using data to drive up a lot. It sounds like in discovery, personalization, marketing, machine learning is incredibly powerful for more efficiently attracting users and matching them to the right products. And then we have a really healthy chunk too, oriented around driving down costs by automating services. And I think this is acknowledgement that more and more of what humans are doing can be automated. And when we automate that, that allows humans to actually reach their fuller potential by doing things that really only humans can. We definitely see that in the context of empowering and enabling our own services team. And then a nice chunk too interested in how we can improve supply chain inventory management and related optimizations.
So I'd be curious, Emily, like, I think these poll answers are great examples of what being data-driven does look like. Like, what do you think it does not look like?
Yeah, so being data-driven is not just about having a lot of data. Data volume is necessary, but far from sufficient. I'm out in the field talking to companies, mostly CDOs, CTOs, CIOs, but also heads of L&D. Let's say I've talked to 50 or so in the last 60 days, all of whom are investing heavily in becoming data first. And I'm seeing actually a huge disconnect, which is more precisely a huge missed opportunity, where in some of the biggest companies with the most data, and therefore the most data opportunity, are often the ones doing the least with their data. And I think some of that ties back to skill shortages, some of that ties back to legacy systems. We can dig in a little bit more there, but it's not just about having a lot of data. On the other extreme, being data-driven is not just about employing a ton of data scientists. I actually see companies once in a while, or quite often, say, hey, I want to be data first, therefore I'm going to go out and hire a bunch of new grad machine learning PhDs, and they'll make magic happen. And having the technical talent is necessary, but it's far from sufficient. So one of the things I want to talk about today is the whole hierarchy of creating value from data, and how you have to have talent at every level of that hierarchy. And then also the need to have folks across the organization who can use that data effectively. So what's the secret sauce? Generally, I think being a data first organization comes down to having the right platform, the right people, and the right processes to enable. And so platforms for me are all about having the infra and tooling in place to enable efficient use of data. And, I joined Coursera about 6 years ago. At the time, we were building a lot of our own data infrastructure. Now, with the proliferation of high quality cloud providers across the data stack, this is becoming less and less of a blocker. In particular, once an organization has trained their people on how to leverage those platforms. The second dimension is really the people. And I don't think so much about it being the right people. I think about it being people with the right skills. So do your data scientists know the method and tools they need to be productive today for the business problems your organization is facing today? But also, do your, for example, marketers know enough to partner effectively with the data team, to communicate quantitative insights, to learn from A/B tests, maybe to launch personalized campaigns? I know many of you are focused on using data to power marketing and discovery. And then third, on process, this is really about how we operate as a company, how we infuse data across decision-making and products and services. And processes also starts with the people. Often, more precisely, it starts with the leaders, many of whom I'm guessing are the folks on the call today. So while there's a lot of hype around automation of jobs, I just want to pause for a moment and say, I think the more real issue than jobs disappearing is jobs changing in their nature. This is true certainly for the services folks. Many of you are oriented around automating components of servicing, but it's also true for the data teams and the marketing teams. And correspondingly, this requires meaningful shifts in the skills that are needed to be productive on the job. And we know and hear time and time again from our customers and also read in the literature that this is creating huge strain on businesses today. On the flip side, there's a lot of upside to being data-driven. And so a lot comes down to core challenges we're seeing in the market tied to shortages of data skills. For example, about a third of CDOs are reporting that poor data literacy, and this is really company-wide data literacy, is a top barrier to achieving their goals. And data-related roles are increasingly hard to hire for, remaining open for more than a third longer than market average. The great news, though, is that reskilling and upskilling can be a win for businesses. And there's a lot of upside to being data-driven. Correspondingly, high-performing organizations are no strangers to being well-educated by data. But I think there is often an open question from folks I'm talking to about how organizations should get there. So the great news is reskilling and upskilling isn't just a win for business. It's a win for staff as well. So many of your staff are worried about both automation and the shifting relevance of their skill sets. This is true even in, late stage startups like Coursera, where our employees have more or less cutting edge skills. They're still crying out for high quality learning opportunities. And across the board, over 3/4 of working adults say they want to learn new skills or completely retrain in order to improve their future employability. And given the uncertainty of the current times, I would expect these numbers are, if anything, increasing. The good news is it's the folks watching here today who can support this drive towards skills transformation for your businesses and also for your staff. So we're going to delve into our recommended approach. But before that, I'd love to know about the data skills transformation that's most difficult for your businesses today that led you to join us here. So in particular, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment and thinking about what are the types of challenges you're struggling with, whether it's leadership not understanding the full potential of data or asking you to be more data driven, but you're not sure where to start. Literacy issues across the organization, being behind on innovation relative to the competition, being unsure what specific data skills people need, or knowing what they need, but not knowing who has them and who doesn't. And finally, sort of this challenge around data talent and not being able to hire the right people fast enough.
I wonder, Emily, as people are giving their responses to this, you said you've talked with a lot of data leaders over the course of the past couple months, and I'm wondering, what are some of the things that you've seen or some of the big trends that have really stuck out?
Yeah, so I was actually surprised at the level of urgency I was hearing from data leaders in upskilling their own teams. I was prepared to hear challenges in finding talent and hiring efficiently. I was prepared to hear challenges in, hey, my cross-functional partners don't know enough to partner with me effectively. But I was surprised that literally across the board, every data leader I spoke with wanted their teams to become more proficient in certain tools or technologies, or learn new methodologies based on a new business opportunity. And I think this speaks to the pace of change within the field. I think this also speaks to the demand from employees to continue learning. But sort of, I think data teams, can think of themselves as rock stars. And I think it shows a lot of humility to say, hey, actually, there are really big gaps and there's more we need to learn. And so that was sort of the most urgent and pressing need I was hearing.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. I think we're ready to show the results.
Fantastic. So over half cite poor data literacy across the organization as hampering overall goals. And I think this actually is very consistent with the earlier question around what are the core opportunities? If a lot of the opportunity is data-driven decision-making, decisions happen across the organization, and data literacy is required for those decisions to happen effectively and quickly and at the lowest possible level. It looks like there are a number of folks who aren't sure what skills specific people need. So we'll talk about that a little bit today. And also they think they know what skills people need, but they aren't sure who has them and who doesn't. And this is actually something we hear, how do I separate the sheep from the goats? We hear this in particular from chief data and analytics officers, people who are coming into organizations. They're seeing a lot of folks with data science or analytics type titles, and they just don't know what skills those people have. We're also hearing this across functions. So marketing leaders are saying, hey, I know my marketing team needs to be more data first, but I'm not sure exactly what skills marketers need to have. And then actually a strong distribution across the others as well. So leadership not understanding the full potential, not sure where to start, can't hire fast enough. Competitors are innovating, but we're not keeping up. So we'll talk about approaches for really tackling all of these over the course of today. So at the core of our approach, building data and analytics capabilities relies on these three components. So the first is understanding how data capabilities fit together. The second, and I'll use a framework of sort of a Maslow-esque hierarchy of data needs. The second is around mapping business goals to skill objectives. We're not doing data for the sake of data. We're doing data science or machine learning or data engineering or whatever in order to meet the business needs. And the third is really about deploying successful programs. And this comes down to identifying which skills each individual needs up to what level relative to where they are today, and then getting them the learning programs to close the gap. So let's start with the first. Understanding the data capabilities isn't just a subject matter expertise thing. Learning and development and data teams need to have a shared understanding. In general, the mission of any data team should be to create value from data. And if you've never seen this sort of Maslow-esque hierarchy of data before, here's one that I use at Coursera when thinking about the capabilities of my team. So let me briefly cover this framework, which is oriented around how we can create value from data, and then talk about how this maps on to roles and to skills. So at the bottom is data infrastructure. This sort of comes down to some of the platforms I mentioned, building the right architecture and tooling to collect, store, and deploy effectively. And increasingly, you're not building this from scratch, right? You're buying or doing a buy-build hybrid based on where you are with your existing systems. One level up from that is data processing. And this is really about managing data efficiently and at scale. This includes data curation and standardization. One level above that is analytics, which I think of as counting things and hopefully counting the right things. It's very dangerous to count the wrong things. And then above that is decision science, which is counting things to inform quantitative or automated decision making. So generally you're thinking about causal inference here, understanding what drives what, and using that for decision making. And then near the top is machine learning, which is actually a lot like decision science. You're counting things to inform quantitative or automated decision making, but you're doing it now with a feedback loop, so it gets smarter over time. And I should note that I could have had a separate tab at the very top called AI, which is roughly the set of things machines can't do until they can. But more and more people are talking about general machine learning as AI, so I've lumped them here, and we can maybe have the AI versus ML debate another time. So who does this work? At Coursera, it's evolved over time. When I first joined, the answer was whoever. As we grew and evolved, I realized that a lot of the data engineering was not my or data science in general's core comparative advantage. So I spun up a data engineering function, really oriented around the data infrastructure and the data processing. I also subsequently split out our data science group into two sub-functions, decision science and machine learning. So today my team is called the data team, and we have these three functions, and the levels of the hierarchy map roughly onto these. So data engineering is focused on data collection, curation, standardization, and sharing, plus internal self-serve analytics, externally facing analytical products for our university partners and enterprise customers, as well as some components of infra and tooling. The decision science group within data science is focused on the insights to inform product and business direction. So this team defines, tracks, and reports on metrics, so some component of analytics, and then applies inference, experimentation, and prediction on top, which is more in the realm of decision science. And finally, the machine learning group is focused on building the models and algorithms that directly power our products, our marketing, and our services. Coursera has 500 people, 30 are on this end-to-end data team, and as companies grow, so do the specialization of data roles. So all these get more granular. Here are some examples of the nomenclature. The underlying data capabilities are the same. The primary difference is how you distribute those capabilities across people and roles. And actually, as companies get even bigger, you see even further specialization. So for example, I talked to some companies where within data scientists, they have some who are specialized in natural language processing and others who are specialized in causal inference, or some who work in Python and others for whom SAS is sufficient. Mm-hmm. So according to this framework, I'm curious where you see the biggest capability gap in your organization. And again, this pyramid has data infrastructure at the bottom, then data processing, analytics, decision science, and AI and machine learning. So in the same order, imagine this were just a pyramid, and think about where the biggest capability gap is for you today.
You know, as we run these polling questions, I'm really wishing that there was an ability for the moderator to like inject some Jeopardy style music.
That would be great.
I was trying to figure out like, what do we do with the silence? Like it feels so silent. And I'm like, you know, some like elevator music would really help right now.
Well, in part and maybe to help fill some of that silence, Crystal, we had a great question, Emily, from Paul, and I'm going to mess up your last name, so I'll stick with Paul. But the question was, why isn't AI ML included in data processing and/or analytics? So I gave a brief answer about how we found it useful to stack this hierarchy in such a way. And I think, Emily, you gave a great overview. But as people are thinking through some of these things, maybe that's a question we can address as well. How do we pull that out, and how do we think about those differently?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I think partly because of the marketing appeal, folks are increasingly calling everything data-related AI or ML in some context. And I think the risk there, and there's some upside, but I think the biggest risk is it can create confusion about what are the individuals actually doing, how are they creating value from data, correspondingly what skills do they need to have. And I think having real clarity on sort of this framework for how we're creating value from data, and having real clarity, and it looks like you all do, on where in the stack there's the most opportunity, informs what type of talent you want to bring in, how you want to train people, how you want to design and orient your teams. I saw another open question from Tom, and then we can get to the polling results, but Tom asked, could AI/ML be interpreted as the operationalization of the decisioning process outlined by data scientists? And the answer is absolutely, right? So decision science, and that's a great point, decision science is about counting things to inform automated decision making. And then you take it to the next level. When you're sufficiently certain in it, you want to actually set the machines up to do that themselves and to do it with a feedback loop so they get smarter over time. And that's exactly how we think about AI or ML relative to decision science. So it sounds like there are folks actually interested at all stages, and I noticed we have some IT and engineering leaders probably very interested in data infrastructure in particular, and potentially also interested in AI and ML and productionalizing some of those models. But about 40% are oriented around decision science. And it's interesting to me, you know, data science, because it means so many different things at different places. It's decision science at some places, it's analytics at others, it's ML at others still. And I've been seeing increasingly a trend among companies, I think Bayer is one, transitioning to really proactively talking about a subset of their data team as a decision science team, to make it crystal clear that these folks are oriented around causal inference. They may use predictive modeling, they may use machine learning as a technique, but they aren't building into production. They're really empowering the right decisions internally. Fantastic. So now that we have a shared understanding kind of how the hierarchy of data can help you create value from data, let's walk through mapping business goals to skill objectives. And over you know, the past couple months, I've been talking to many companies on the path to being data-driven, largely technical leaders, but also learning leaders. And throughout our work with customers on the journey to becoming data savvy, we've seen how many have taken to setting up academies to bridge the gap. We've seen a lot of different frameworks and models across the various sectors and organizations, you know, whether the frameworks are called Aware, Adopt, Lead, or Do, Decide, Discuss. At their core, these training models are overwhelmingly serving three core use cases. So where we're seeing companies be most effective in transitioning to data-first organizations is when they take a holistic approach across all three prongs. The first is about developing data literacy across the organization. And we heard that need from you loud and clear at the beginning of the webinar. The second is around upskilling talent in the core data skills needed for the function. This includes within technical teams, data science and engineering, but also with the customers of data teams like marketing, product, and services. And then the third prong is around reskilling internal talent for hard to fill data roles. And so let's walk together through the types of questions you might ask of your organization to identify which of these are the core opportunities for you. So we'll start with thinking about broad-based data literacy and why it's important for organizations. There was actually a recent article in HBR from Josh Burson that sums it up fantastically. And he talked to analytics teams at 20 sophisticated companies. He interviewed them about their pain points. And what he heard across the board was this emphasis on broader organization lacking the skills to ask the right questions and everything downstream. So to understand the relevant information, to interpret data, to tell the story. And this is exactly the issue that broad-based data literacy is aimed at solving. So in a world where the analytics team is all set and up and running, how do you make sure the broader organization can effectively interpret for decision-making and for application? What this boils down to is across the organization, you need your people to have two things. The first is a common framework and language for efficient, high-quality decision-making. And the second is a basic understanding of what is and is not, equally important, possible with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And ownership on this is funny. It's, you know, it's data literacy is an imperative, but who owns it? Often data literacy is not the core mandate of, say, the chief data officer or the CTO, although it's very critical to those teams' efficacy. And the Burson article notes how central it is to the company reaching its full potential. So that directive often falls within learning and development to make it happen. So quick check-in and just a reminder first, two use cases for data literacy. One is around data literacy for decision-making. The other is around data literacy awareness of how AI and ML can be applied. Let's start with the decision-making question first. As you think about your organization, and this may be slightly skewed by the composition of folks on the call, although maybe that's also a reflection of the same, who most needs data literacy in your organization for decision-making? Marketing, sales, product design, engineering, services, operations. So which of the cross-functional partners of the data team need to really up their data literacy in order to correctly consume the insights.
And Emily, while we're looking at this, Bill had a great comment about becoming data fluent and how it can be difficult. Some people just think we wave a wand and teach data fluency, but it actually involves a lot of work. And I thought that was an excellent point. It's not as easy as just giving people some materials and then sending them on their way. Maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah, it is not just about giving people some materials and sending them on their way. I think, our approach is really around goal-based skill development. So saying, in order to use the data effectively for decision-making, in this example, what skills does each individual need up to what level? And that may vary by function. And then correspondingly, what's the shortest path content, courses, projects, etc., that can close that gap and get individuals those skills up to that level. There's also sort of a related question. I wish you can map to all the courses in the hierarchy just mentioned, AI/ML to data processing offered by different universities. Absolutely. So my team has built a skills graph which understands what skills are taught in each unit of content, as well as what skills are required for each career and what skills each learner has up to what level. And this forms the basis of our learning paths.
Oh, the results are in. Great.
Super interesting. So more than half operations, which ties to some of the improved margins, cost reduction we talked about earlier, and fast followed by marketing, which isn't surprising, both due to composition on the call and also what we heard around building personalized discovery experiences, sales, product and design, of course, engineering. So really across the board. Fascinating. And then the second component of data literacy, in addition to using data for decision-making, is on AI and ML. So who in your company most needs to be aware of machine learning concepts? And here, this is not to be able to execute, of course. We're not going to actually ask them to deploy a model, but instead to be able to partner with your technical teams to realize the opportunities for their function.
And I find this is so critical as well. One of our customers that partnered with us was launching, and this was like, I think we had the agreement with them signed 2 years ago. They've just come up on the end of their program and have renewed with us. They had purchased Coursera to teach their engineers machine learning, but also their marketing group machine learning, because they were taking a new AI product to market, and their marketers also needed very much to be aware of how to talk the talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's an interesting related question from Barris. We hear more and more about the critical role of translators to bridge the gap between technical and business folks. Are there special training courses for translators? Absolutely. And, different companies call these different things. I've also heard them called citizen data scientists. And one of the places we've seen the most success is when those citizen data scientists actually live in the function. So I am in marketing, for example, but I am more quantitative among the marketers, and I'm interested in, being more active in the data space. And so my company upskills me as kind of a citizen data scientist within marketing, or a translator to bridge the gap between marketing and technical. And that allows me to use my domain expertise in marketing and the relationships I have in marketing while still upskilling on the data side, similarly for services and so on. So these are actually similar in stack rank, maybe slightly different. I see, more in engineering, which makes sense. A lot of the machine learned solutions actually need to be deployed in production out to users, and that's generally a partnership with engineering, both back-end engineers to actually get the algorithm out, but also front-end engineers, right? How should the experience look? Similarly, that requires product and design. So really fascinating responses. So that was around literacy, and it looks like actually there's pretty broad-based demand for literacy across the different functions. Next up, I wanted to talk about upskilling. So as a leader, when you're sort of reimagining what your team of the future looks like you have to think about how you're going to upskill your teams, what incremental skills they need. Again, this includes the technical team, so making sure your data scientists, your data engineers, your machine learning engineers are up to speed on the relevant tools and technologies and on the required required methods. And I hear a lot of desire, as I mentioned earlier in response to Kyle's question, to do more with the existing team. So, hey, I have data scientists that are good in inference, but we need to upskill them in prediction. Or I have data scientists who are strong in statistical programming, but they need to migrate to open source languages like R or Python. I also hear a lot of desire to be more flexible in hiring. And this comes back to upskilling as well. So being able to bring in folks who have some but not all of the skills required to do the job, and then upskill them once they've landed. So you might think, for example, what's the profile of someone you could hire straight out of graduate school and then upskill incrementally? This is also, in some cases, I found an opportunity to create more diverse teams. So to consider whether there are talent pools that we can hire out of that may not be a traditional match, may not look on paper like they have absolutely all of the skills required for the job, but with a little bit of incremental upskilling training could be well positioned. For example, in our data, we see what field people are in, and we also observe what skills they have up to what level based on their performance on all of the assessments and projects they've taken on Coursera. This is an application of our skills graph. And we see, for instance, that learners who are physicists or biostatisticians or quantitative researchers are often just as high in many of the core data science skills as industry data scientists, making them prime targets for upskilling into those roles. Of course, upskilling extends beyond the technical teams as well. So capitalizing on the data opportunity is a team sport. I think that's reflected in the composition of folks on the call. And upskilling is really about ensuring each function has the relevant cutting edge skills for peak performance. This is particularly important for customers of the data team who need to be exceptional partners in order to make the most of the data opportunity. So does marketing, does product, does engineering have sufficient data skills to implement what the data teams are giving them? Does services, supply chain, ops have sufficient data skills to take action based on the insights or to effectively incorporate ML solutions into their workflow? So the upskilling use case is really for technical and for non-technical teams. I'm curious, as you think about upskilling, what are the core opportunities that upskilling might unlock for your teams? And really the goal of these polls is to walk you through what our process looks like in designing learning programs. And once you've made it through this webinar, you'll be 95% of the way to learning program design. So this could be about your technical employees or about your non-technical employees, keeping their skills cutting edge, being more flexible in your hiring bar, bringing in new grads, increasing diversity, and also retaining people by actively investing in their marketable skills.
And while that result is coming in, I think Danilo had a couple of questions. One of them, I think, is actually a very good a question about how we do skills tagging. How do you know when someone taking Coursera is called a certain type of role? And Emily, I was just wondering if you could give a quick overview of how our skills graph links all this different type of information together.
Yeah, absolutely. So Janila's question, so when do you know when someone taking Coursera can be, say, an ML engineer? What are the metrics behind this when it comes to skills? So when learners join Coursera and when they're setting their goals, when they're moving through their experience, they have an opportunity to fill in a profile. And in that profile, they tell us things like what industry they work in, what company they work at, as well as their current role. And this is across the 50 million learners on our consumer platform. And then as those learners are engaging with the learning experience, they're taking assessments, they're completing projects. And in our skills graph, each of those assessments and each of those projects is mapped to particular skills that are being assessed. And we also know the level at which they're being assessed. And so then when you look for a given learner across all of the projects and assessments she's attempted, you're able to back out her skill profile. So her proficiency in each of a range of skills. And then we can look, for example, hey, among ML engineers, what is the skill profile? Among ML engineers in the tech industry in the Bay Area, what is their skill profile? And so on. And this powers a number of applications, but one of those is setting the target skill profiles for particular roles and the corresponding content recommendations that allow individuals to reach those target roles. So really a more empirically based approach to training and development. Interesting. So the results are in, and retaining is very, very high on the list. Almost 2/3 of folks are interested in investing in training to retain employees by actually investing in their marketable skills. And this comes back to, I think, a stat earlier where 3 out of 4 working adults are really hungry to be learning more. And that's actually a huge opportunity and a huge shift. So you're not pulling teeth here. Folks are eager to do this. I suspect they'll be even more eager the more time they're spending working from home. And then there were a number of other use cases. I know we need to move on, but it looked like there was distribution across other use cases for reskilling, for upskilling as well. And finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about reskilling. And so when we think about building a data pipeline that's compatible with the organization's future needs, as every hiring manager in the data domain knows, it's really hard to hire high quality data scientists and data engineers and machine learning engineers. We talked a little bit about how you can use upskilling to bring in folks who may not have all the skills and get them the incremental skills on the job. But more generally, there's more demand for talent than supply. And in addition to requiring the technical skill set, being effective in these data roles, and I think this is probably clear from the discussions we've had to date, also requires domain expertise and an understanding of the business and relationships internally. And so there's a lot of upside to looking at internal employees who may not yet be on the data team and identifying opportunities to retrain them to fill these hard to find positions. So it's worth asking whether there are analytical functions in the organization that could be upskilled into data scientists. Maybe it's, FP&A analysts or marketing analysts, or back-end engineers who may be well-positioned to become machine learning engineers. And so, I'd love to hear from this group based on your experience, and I know that across engineering, IT, and data, it's about half of our participants. Which roles or functions, if any, have you had success reskilling into data roles?
And we just have a few marked out here, but and we know that some of our own customers are really on the cutting edge when thinking about internal mobility for existing employees. But there are also a large swath of companies out there that haven't either put in the framework or thought too much about this as a potential avenue for creating a sustainable talent pipeline for data talent. And
lots haven't tried it yet.
Looks like
yeah. I think there's also perceived organizational barriers. It looks like the most common is engineering. My guess is that would be either back-end engineers moving to data engineering or to machine learning engineering. Finance, I would guess that some of sort of the analysts, marketing again, some of the analysts. But it seems like the majority haven't tried, and it's definitely worth trying in the context in which those folks are supported with learning programs that can close the gap. We wouldn't want to throw someone into a role they're not well positioned for.
Emily, sorry, really quickly before we move on, I know we're coming close on time, but I thought Arvind actually had a really good question that's aligned with the responses that we just received. So in a large organization with many groups, data is built for purpose and silos applicable to those groups. The real value is breaking those silos. So his question was really, how can data science help here? How can data science help be a driver and a leader in breaking down some of these silos and helping to reskill others and share data?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think in some of the organizations that are most effective in using data, they've moved to a centralized data organization, but many still have not moved there. And even their data teams are siloed. So for example, they would report into the business units, the GMs. I think it's really important, no matter the reporting structure, to have a center of excellence within data science and to think about what are the horizontal opportunities that span the businesses. When I think about a lot of the decision-making or inference, it's making decisions across business lines. It's making decisions not only based on what we're seeing in supply chain, but also based on what we're seeing in demand. And I think a centralized data organization, or at least a center of excellence within data science, has a unique opportunity to span the different verticals and create value by looking across. But it's challenging. It's challenging, in particular when resources are determined at the BU level. How do you get resources for a centralized team? It's also challenging because a lot of the value of data science is integrating with the business. And so there is a little bit of this sort of dance, I think, between whether you're fully centralized or fully embedded. And at Coursera, we've moved to a hybrid model we call the partnerships model, where it's small groups of data team members are pseudo-embedded with partner teams, but are members of the central data organization and working together to build that horizontal infrastructure, tooling, and also insights that look across the organization. But it's a great question, and I think that opportunity is increasingly why companies are hiring chief data officers and having chief data officers report directly to the CEO, because they recognize there's a need to look across the organization, and that these silos are really not doing justice to the data opportunity. So last up, once you've sort of understood the hierarchy of data capabilities, we've mapped business goals to skill objectives, and then it's time to launch successful programs. And so what do we mean by that? So from driving literacy to upskilling to reskilling, a lot of companies find that building these high quality data skills learning solutions from scratch is hard. And in particular, there are a few things that are hard, some of which came up earlier. One is identifying which skills are right for which populations of people. We heard this loud and clear from the attendees. Ensuring that programs have not only the breadth, but also the depth for people who are upskilling and reskilling in the data domain. And then also making sure that the solution is sufficiently customized to your particular company. Different folks have, as we've seen, different use cases for data. And what we've learned from many of our customers and from talking to other leaders in learning and development is that successful deployment depends on a few things. First is really the literacy, which we're also hearing from you all today, making sure everyone can develop their data skills. It's a tall order, but we have a bunch of L&D folks on the line, and really the whole organization needs to change if transformation is what we're after. The second is a framework that makes learning design really easy, content that maps skills to roles for the role and skill profiles that matter, out of the box with some flexibility and configurability given needs of individual organizations. Online learning that employees actually trust and want to engage with, and I think a lot of this actually comes back to expert instruction. And then reporting on the learning metrics that business units are really interested in, which by the way is not hours spent, it is skills developed and proficiency levels and how employees are advancing. So that's why we designed the Data Science Academy. It is targeted at driving at the bottom in blue, data literacy for everyone, developing critical data skills for each function, technical and non-technical, and reskilling internal talent for in-demand roles. How do we do this? We do this through a very skills-first approach, so through target skill profiles, each of which maps to courses and projects that support the learner in reaching those goals. We have dozens of target skill profiles aimed at helping organizations drive data literacy, upskill teams, and reskill for in-demand roles. And the corresponding learning pathways feature expert instruction from data leaders, employees, and subject matter experts we'll be excited to learn from, like Andrew Ng, an AI pioneer, founding lead of Google Brain, Martin Odersky, who better to learn Scala from than the founding father of Scala. And then each target skill profile is a set of skills and required levels based on what we observe empirically looking across the more than 50 million learners on Coursera. And then these are mapped to content to reach those skill goals. And content here is a blend of expert-led learning and applied learning with guided projects. These are from top universities and companies. I wanted to touch briefly on projects. These allow your employees to learn and apply real-world data tools and skills right in virtual desktops and follow instructions alongside play-by-play tutorials. So really active, hands-on. And this is so critical to taking that kind of theoretical learning and making it translate to productivity increases on the job. It all happens entirely in browser. There's no software needed, no installations, no long chats with IT, so your employees can dive straight in to applying what they've learned. And while many other learning providers offer metrics by proxy, like number of hours taken or courses completed, you can see those on Coursera, but you'll also be able to track the actual skills that are being developed and up to what level, based on performance, again, on all of the assessments and projects the learner has attempted, and powered on the back end by our skills graph. So you won't have to guess if someone is actually proficient in Python. With any solution, you'll want to set and drive objectives for skill development. So with Coursera's Academy, you can do this inside the product itself. You can use our out-of-the-box target skill profiles, or you can create your own. And then from there, you're able to track skill development over time against these objectives. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is that this is not opaque to the learner. So on the learner side, as they move through content, they'll see their skill score improve incrementally. They'll get personalized recommendations on what to take next to grow in each skill, and see progress against the target that their learning leader has set. We've seen an early beta test that learners are much more motivated to progress through learning when they see the objectives their organization has set for them. They want to be able to contribute to the bottom line. They want to be able to contribute to your goals. And when those business goals are mapped to skill objectives, it's really empowering for learners, and they can feel the value of content all the more acutely. So I want to move into Q&A, and before we do, just a final check-in about what you think your business needs most urgently in order to become data-driven. And here we've mapped it to the framework covered today: literacy, driving basic data skills for decision-making and/or AI awareness for everyone; upskilling for technical teams in data; upskilling for non-technical teams, the partners of data; and finally reskilling, building a sustainable data talent pipeline by looking at other internal talent.
And Emily, just a question that goes along with this, I think, from the top of the list. I promised Santosh that I'd circle back to this after they reposted the question, but it seems like a bit of a catch-22 where infra processing is critical to enable DSML-based insights. I want to tie this question here because it seems like you need literacy in order to get people to understand why it's important to invest in the most advanced stuff, but it's hard to show the business return without having already done the analysis that maybe require some more advanced capabilities. So how do you handle this chicken and egg type situation?
It's a great question. It absolutely feels like a chicken and egg. And my approach, or my recommended approach, which is also what I took at Coursera, would be the same approach that companies make when they're building marketplaces. So when they're building marketplaces, do you go after supply? Do you go after demand? The answer is you go after a little supply and then a little demand and then a little supply and then a little demand, right? So you're never out of whack. And I think the analog here, and Santosh's question was basically, hey, infra and processing and those foundations are super important for enabling AI and ML. How can you convince companies to invest in that infra and processing before you've proven the value of AI and ML? And so my recommendation would be identify a couple pieces of low-hanging fruit in the ML world. Couple that with literacy, make sure folks understand what's possible, but then have 1 or 2 wins. How can you drive revenue meaningfully? How can you drive down costs meaningfully in a way that doesn't actually require super deep foundations, maybe because you can do an offline POC, for example. And then once you've built those proofs of concept, demonstrated the value that can be created for the organization, increasingly build up the infrastructure, generate more proof of concepts, increasingly build up the infrastructure, start to deploy stuff, and so on. So I would take an iterative approach, just as if I were building a marketplace: a little bit of supply, a little bit of demand, a little bit of supply, a little bit of demand, where I think of supply as the infrastructure and the tooling, and demand is proven value that can be created from AI. So over half are all of the above. It seems like for those choosing one, probably literacy is the strongest, but really across the board, it sounds like we call this our LURE framework, by the way: L for literacy, U for upskilling, and RE for reskilling. It sounds like the LURE framework resonates at all levels for folks on the call today. So with that, I'd love to dive into Q&A and appreciate Kyle and Crystal that you all have been helping us get through these kind of as we go.
We'll probably have time for, I think, one more question, and it is just because we've had Q&A throughout the session. It's been really amazing to have such an engaged audience with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to take one actually that tackles customization in particular. So this is from Sudhar, and he asks, do you have recommendations engines that can recommend courses or skills based on project descriptions? And the answer is that we don't yet have an externally facing productized version of that. But for large enterprise customers, as part of our skills transformation offering, we are able to ingest your project descriptions or your existing skills goals, map those to our skills graphs, and correspondingly to courses. And that's something we love doing. We're looking for a more standardized way to do it across customers, but the truth is everyone has slightly different frameworks. And so currently the offline approach has been higher fidelity and is something that we're delighted to do in the case of large deals. So don't hesitate to reach out. I think, Crystal, do you know the right alias to reach out to?
It would be business@coursera.org.
Fantastic. And we can follow up from there.
Well, we're almost at time, so I'm just going to wrap us up actually with one more poll. Thank you so much, Emily. It's been really amazing to hear from you and your expertise as a data leader, and also as someone who's been speaking with L&D and data leaders about their upskilling needs. So thank you. So this is our final question to the audience. We're thinking about how to make this a better webinar, or how to make a better webinar series for both the learning and SME community. So what of these options would you like us to cover in future webinar topics? You know, right now we want to be responsive to what's going on in the world, and we were thinking about doing a webinar on driving capability building in a time of uncertainty. There's also, you know, how to build an academy for critical skills, how to connect with your SMEs if you're a learning leader to help design better learning objectives, identifying employees in your company who need specific skills, or assessing existing skill levels of your employees, or just best practices from our skills transformation team about how to curate from Coursera's catalog. Oh, wow. There's a lot of response here around how to assess existing skill levels. So this is the separating the sheep from the goats. I mean, I'm really excited about a particular feature that's coming out in the product, hopefully by summer of this year. We're working on diagnostics for the data science realm. And so that will help to tackle some of the sort of the separating sheep and goats there. And we're busy at work developing diagnostics for other parts of our catalog as well. So thank you for that. And I'm going to hand this back to Deb to close us out.
Great. Thank you, Crystal. So I want to thank you all for staying on the full hour this morning. We want to leave you with one last thing. The target skills profile that Emily walked us through and previewed, you can learn more about in our recently released ebook that you see here up on the screen. It goes over some of the target skill profiles that will help your business become more data-driven and explains what skills that are developed from convergent to advanced skills, from statistical programming to machine learning. Each target skill profile is powered by Coursera content and projects, and you'll learn more about that and what the exact content is in this guide. So check it out at the URL at the bottom. And we really appreciate all the interactivity in today's session and answering all the polling questions. And stay tuned to hear more from us in the future. Meanwhile, have a great day and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.